Hi guys, my name is Caitlin, and this project is going to reflect my knowledge from chapters 1 to 15, and I'm going to show how I can see them in my life, in the past, present, and hopefully even in the future. I use different terms from the book to talk about how they impact my life and where I can see them most. I talk about my friends, family, and even my own thoughts. Some of the pictures that I used are AI, and others are personal. I enjoyed this project and being able to reflect on how these terms make me who I am today. Chapter 1, the introduction to child development, I first talked about agreement reality. I would say that I share a lot of these views. I would share a lot of views with my mother. I look up to her and value her opinion, so a lot of things that she tells me, I side with her. I know this shouldn't necessarily be the case, but I tend to still do this to this day. The social learning theory, I see this in my nieces and nephews all the time. They're at the age where they love to copy my older sister. They've even repeated some bad words, so now she has to be extra cautious. When it comes to blinders, this is a habit that I am actively trying to break. I have a bad habit of assuming things based on stuff that I already know. A silly example is that my little brother, he's 8, and he has a bad habit of lying, so now I assume that all kids lie a lot. In chapter 2, it's about the conception, heredity, and prenatal development. When it comes to phenotypes, everyone says that I am my mom's little mini me. I have the same features as her, so we look the same. I love when people call me her twin because she's so beautiful. For the second term, I chose X-linked disorders. I have a few male cousins that are actually colorblind. What's weird is that we did not know that they were colorblind until later on in their lives. Since I know that it runs in my family, if I ever have children in the future, I'll be proactive to try to diagnose them early on. I also enjoyed learning about maternal factors. I saw this with my aunt. She got pregnant at 39, and her baby has a lot of health issues now. She was born at 6 months old, and she was in the hospital for about a year. She had to have multiple surgeries in her first year of life. It's a miracle that she's still alive today. Chapter 3 talks about birth and the newborn. I really enjoyed learning about hypnobirthing. The more that I read about it, the more that I think I would prefer this method. Birthing can seem like a scary experience, but I believe that if you fear and dread it, it will only make the experience worse. I think that relaxation and breathing techniques would help me more in the future. When it comes to natural childbirth, my mom wanted to do a natural birth without an epidural. She said that she wished she would have stuck to her decision because when the epidural wore off, she went from 0 to 100 immediately. I'm not sure which one I will choose. If I get to have children one day. I also enjoyed learning about low birth weight because my mom said that this happened to me when I was born. My sister and I were the opposite. My sister was 9 pounds and I was less than 5. I had to stay in a hospital for an extra 2 days to make sure that I was healthy enough to go home. Chapter 4 talks about the physical development in infancy and toddlerhood. For gross motor skills, my mom said that I started crawling at a pretty young age. She would take home videos, so I love to look back on them and watch them. She said that I started crawling at a young age, so everything else followed pretty quickly. When it comes to vision, my mom has really great vision and my dad does not, on the other hand. Luckily, I got my mom's genes for vision, so I have 20/20 vision. Although this is a positive, I remember being younger and wanting glasses so badly like my older sister. The topic of immunizations can be very touchy. My family follows the Christian Scientist belief system, so my mom did not have us vaccinated as children. I'm still not sure exactly what my beliefs are yet. I understand our religious side, but I also understand the medical reasons of why people end up doing it. Chapter 5 is the cognitive development in infancy and toddlerhood. Some cognitive milestones. My mom says that my nephew and I are very similar. My nephew is advanced when it comes to cognitive milestones, and he usually reaches them before his intended age. He's very curious and he loves to learn. My grandma tells me that I was a chatterbox, and my language development was very fast when I was younger. I love to talk, and sometimes I would talk really fast. They would have to tell me to slow down. This goes into how I developed a stutter. I was doing well with language for about 6 months when I randomly developed a stutter as a toddler. I remember this being so frustrating to me. My parents would have to stop me and tell me to slow down and think about what I was going to say before I said it. Eventually I grew out of it, but it was a really hard time for me. Chapter 6 talks about the social emotional development in infancy and toddlerhood. For culture, I was surrounded by many different cultures growing up. My mom's side is German and my dad's side is Irish. I also had a few babysitters that were Hispanic. I love hearing and learning about all their different cultures and becoming more knowledgeable. I would say that my family is an individualistic culture usually. This is what we resonate more with. My mom taught us that in order for us to succeed in life, we would need to take care of ourselves first. Now, although I love winning as a team in college, I do appreciate personal accomplishments in school more. When it comes to attachment, I was very attached with my dad at a young age. My parents separated and I primarily lived with my mom. This made me only want to be with my dad that much more. Chapter 7 talks about the physical development in early childhood. For healthy eating habits, my parents did a good job with following all these rules. I was able to eat when I was hungry and they did not force me to eat when I was not. Now I have a positive relationship with food. When it comes to motor skills, my mom stayed home with me when I was younger and we spent a lot of time outside. I was a lot more advanced in this way because we spent so much time doing it. For example, I actually learned how to swim by myself when I was 3. For somnambulism, my dad and I actually both sleepwalk. I used to walk around my house when I was younger, so my parents were scared that I would actually unlock the door in my sleep and leave the house. So they bought an extra lock and they kept it high on the front door where I couldn't reach. Chapter 8 talks about cognitive development in early childhood. The term pretend play is something that I loved learning about. My sister and I used to do this all the time when we were younger. We would play outside and mix different things like dirt and berries to make potions. This is our favorite. We also used to play dolls and babies. I was always the nanny. When we talk about private speech, I try to practice this, but I try to make it positive, especially in my sport. When tensions are high, it's easy to get negative, so I try to keep myself from thinking negatively to keep the spirits higher. The term over-regularization is also something that I did when I was younger. It took me a long time to understand proper English. My grandma would always correct me, even when I was very young. Chapter 9 talks about the social emotional development in early childhood. For self-control, my sister and I were very close growing up, but we also fought a lot. Neither of us had the self-control to just walk away from it and disengage. We would continue to argue until our parents had to break it up. The concept of mothering was very interesting. I do think that my mom let my sister and I stay dependent on her for a long time, but with that being said, she was a single mom, so she also taught us to be independent. She pushed us to be confident in ourselves. I would also say that she had an authoritative parenting style. She was appropriately strict, and we had a lot of boundaries growing up. But on the other hand, she was always willing to negotiate with us if it was reasonable. For example, she didn't allow sleepovers on weekdays until we got to a certain age and we were able to negotiate with her. Chapter 10 talks about the physical development in childhood. When it comes to eating habits, I would say my parents did a good job creating positive eating habits. Again, they never forced me to finish all my food at the dinner table. This is something that their parents made them do when they were younger, and they didn't like it, so they didn't make my sister and I do that. So I've always had a positive relationship with food. When it comes to physical education, this was one of my favorite classes as a kid. In elementary school, we only had it for 2 to 3 days a week, but as we got older, we started to have it every day. I loved being able to go outside at school. Dental health is something that I struggled with when I was younger. I'm very cavity prone due to genetics. So when I was younger, I was hyper focused on brushing my teeth multiple times a day because I hated going to the dentist. Regardless of this, I would still end up getting cavities almost every single time I went. Chapter 11 talks about cognitive development in middle childhood. When it comes to being bilingual, my first neighborhood friend was bilingual. Him and his family would both speak English and Spanish, and they would teach me Spanish when I was younger when I would come over for play dates. Dyslexia is something that I see within my sister. She struggled in school for as long as you can remember. It was hard for my parents to navigate how to help her. Eventually, she was diagnosed with dyslexia, and they were able to help her with proper resources. IQ is actually something that's really funny to me, because growing up, this was something my friends and I loved to test. We would find mini tests online and see who was the smartest. It's crazy to think how a test can give people a sense of superiority. Chapter 12 talks about the social emotional development in middle childhood. For self-esteem, I always thought pretty positively of myself. It was not until I experienced competition in my sports when doubt would creep into my mind. The way I thought of myself would fluctuate depending on the day that I had in my sport. I grew up in a cohabitation house. My parents never got married to each other, so I grew up in a house with both of them until 4th grade when they separated. They were intimate and happy with one another for most of these years. Leading into that, now I have a blended family. Both my dad and my mom got remarried. My stepdad has 2 kids, and my stepmom has 1 daughter, and they had a son with my father. In my blended family, I now have 5 siblings. Chapter 13 talks about physical development in adolescence. I had an adolescent growth spurt in grade school. I was always the shortest, and I was in strenuous sports, so I developed a lot later than others. Doing cheer my whole life meant that I was always a flyer, so when I grew 1.5 feet and I went through my growth spurt, I had to learn a completely new position, which was really hard. When it comes to acne, since I developed later, it also meant that I did not struggle with acne until later on in life. Now I currently have to see a dermatologist to try to figure out how to control my acne. Menarche, my first period was when I was 16 years old. I started late compared to all my friends, and I was even the last to start out of all the women in my family. I struggled with this for a long time because I felt like I just wanted to be a woman. Chapter 14 talks about cognitive development in adolescence. I would say that I have strong cognitive empathy. My mom says that this was good, but sometimes I feel like it's negative. I feel too much concern for others and make their problems my problems. I like to feel like I can help people when sometimes that's not always the case. Also, hypothetical deductive reasoning. I'm a chronic overthinker. Again, this can be both positive and negative. It's positive because I avoid making bad decisions from thinking about the outcomes, but it's negative because I find myself avoiding taking risks because of the possible consequences. Imaginary audience is something that I still do to this day. I worry about what others think about me when they probably aren't even paying attention. I think about outfits and how I would look in the eyes of others. This is a habit that I'm also trying to break because it shouldn't matter. Finally, chapter 15 is about the social emotional development in adolescence. I would say that the media is very strong in my life. Nowadays, it's hard to find factual information online because you can lie without consequences. I go on TikTok as a social platform, but I do see a lot of political topics on my feed. Although I try not to let it sway my political beliefs, it obviously does have an impact. When it comes to heterosexuality, I grew up with a family where all my aunts, uncles, and grandparents are in relationships with people of the opposite gender. This made it to where, as a young kid, homosexuality was harder for me to grasp. As I continue to grow, more and more of the younger generation of my family are able to come out. I love to see my family develop. For the topic of heteronormative, this is definitely the case as my cousins and I all grew up. It has taken a while for our grandparents to realize that this is no longer the norm and that the younger generation is making a change to the norms. This concludes my Lifeline project and all that I have learned so far this semester. I'm very grateful for this class as it has helped to explain why I am the way that I am. I also hope to take some of the information that I've learned and apply it to my own life with my future children. Thank you so much.